It's my gas to know and iconic Sonics thanks. The Swinomish Casino and Lodge, a great partner and a full-on entertainment experience located on Highway 20 just east of Anacortes. I was at the Casino and Lodge a couple of weeks ago and just had a great time. A Saturday night, we started out with a sensational dinner at 13 Moons. You know, the natural beauty and the stunning views of Padilla Bay that's enough. Add in the great meal highlighted with delicious flavors of the Pacific Northwest. I tried scallops with prime rib, a little surf and turf, if you will. It's a dining experience you'll be talking about until you return. Afterwards, we walked through the casino and played, enjoying 700 of the latest slot machines, blackjack, craps, roulette, pie gow, and keno. It was buzzing on a Saturday night. Just a great fun time at the Swinomish Casino and Lodge. Come play and stay with us. The Swinomish Casino and Lodge. More information at SwinomishCasinoandLodge.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700.
Truth Plus Media.
Iconic Sonics in another great episode with a Sonics icon, but an NBA icon as well, and a community of Seattle icon and a longtime friend of mine. But it's funny. I listed all the icons. He never can escape his Cougar roots. He's not fooling anybody. He's got a Wazoo Cougs sweatshirt on there. I saw the back of it. And he's a proud Cougar. Their basketball program had a good year this year. James Donaldson, it's great to see you, and thanks for doing this. How are you, my friend?
That's right. I got to give a shout out to Cougar Nation. Go Cougs, once and all. Great to see you guys. It's been a while, but we've stayed in touch ever since you moved off and onto the island. And You're not retired yet, though.
No, it's funny. I think of our old mutual friend Bob Blackburn, because when Bob left the Sonics broadcast, he kept saying, "I'm not retired. I'm not," because he wanted to do things still. And I've had to do the same thing. Like, no, I just stepped away from radio. I never retired. My CFO, who doubles as my wife, said, "You're not retiring, so don't even think about that for a minute." But no, and this has been a fun way to connect people to the history. You were a Sonic for a few seasons at the start of your career, but you stayed in the city of Seattle forever. I know you're a huge proponent of the NBA coming back, and we'll talk about all of that. But I do want to talk to you. You come out of Washington State after 1978, 79. You played a year in Italy, and then you end up signing with the Sonics. How did that happen? How did it transpire that you go from Italy to join a team that had just won a world championship? What's that story?
Well, the Sonics actually drafted me out of Washington State University in 79. Now they had just won the NBA championship that year. As they say, there was no room at the inn. They weren't going to let go of some, established championship caliber veteran for a young rookie like me, especially in the fourth round, like I was picked. We had 2 first-round picks that year, James Bailey and Vinnie Johnson. So they made the team. I went over to Italy for a year for further seasoning and playing. I played 40 minutes a night over there, double points, double figure rebounds. Came back, and the Sonics still owned my rights at that time, and that time of NBA history, they still owned my rights. So I was obligated to try out for the Sonics unless they released me and I could try out for somebody else. I'm so glad they didn't release me, and I was able to come to training camp and compete with the likes of, Jack Stigma and Dennis Autry and Lonnie Shelton to be one of the big guys on the team, which I was able to make it through training camp and join the team in 1980, the year after the championship.
And you can talk about that a little bit, because winning a championship is hard. Winning a second one is so much harder. And no better example than that group of Sonics. The team stayed pretty much the same. There were some changes, but there was a lot of talent still on that team. And you guys were winning mid-50s in terms of games and getting into the playoffs. But it's hard to go back, isn't it?
It really is. I think after that championship run, they traded away Dennis Johnson for Westfall. So we had a new backcourt of Gus Williams and Paul Westfall, Jack Stigma, Lonnie Shelton, John Johnson. So we had caliber championship players all the way around, but the chemistry changed a little bit, I think, when they traded DJ for Westfall. giving up a great all-around defensive player like DJ for a pretty polished offensive player like Westfall. And so, I was just so fortunate to join an established group of veterans of not only great basketball players, but really good people too. And I've been in touch with virtually all of them throughout those years and still stay in touch with most of them even now.
Well, so many of them stayed around. They were pillars of the community and various business ventures. You as well. Who was the leader of that team? Who was the on-floor leader or the locker room leader that you guys looked to?
I think the two that come to mind most were downtown Freddie Brown and John Johnson, JJ.
Mhm.
Two guys who they were together back in high school, back when they grew up in Iowa.
Right.
And so they knew each other way back then. They were probably 10 years older than I was. So they were real seasoned, real established, but great leaders in the locker room to keep the young talents like Gus Williams and those guys in line. Jack Stigma was a leader, of course, but he was young. And so those two established veterans really, I think, were the leaders that Coach Lenny Wilkins was able to hand off so much of the responsibility to really monitor the team both on the court and in the locker room.
JJ was such a great guy, was supportive of me when I first got to Seattle. Just a terrific guy. He's not with us anymore. Fred still is. Both of them were a little bit, I don't think in Seattle, but I think outside of Seattle, were underrated. Seattle always has been a little bit off the radar. And at the time, better than me, but in 1980, 81, Seattle was still kind of a small town. It wasn't, quite the boom town that it has become. But those who, for Fred in particular, talk about his game a little bit, because I think memories can fade a little. And this guy, anybody who can shoot the ball can play in any era of basketball. And Fred Brown, and he could do other things too, but Freddie could shoot the ball.
Yes. Matter of fact, I just had breakfast with Lenny Wilkins last week, and just catching up with him. We were talking about the championship run and how he came in and took over a 5-17 team. Had a long talk with both Fred Brown and Slick Watts about coming out of the starting lineup and coming off the bench. And he put Gus Williams and DJ into the starting lineup, and they took off and won 10 games in a row. So Fred was always that kind of player. I don't even remember him very much as a starting Sonic player, but he was an offensive force throughout his NBA career, and especially coming off the bench to provide those instant points. They didn't call him downtown for anything.
Yeah, right.
This was before the 3-point shot, so you can imagine how deadly he would have been with the 3-point shot in effect.
You mentioned breakfast with Lenny Wilkins, and Lenny, another guy who came here and they tried to get rid of him. They traded him a couple of times. They sent him off, and he kept coming back. He obviously loved the city of Seattle and stayed here. Just a championship caliber coach. What made him so good in the NBA? Good enough to win, good enough to be a great player, and then to be a championship caliber coach, and then to coach for such a long time. I mean, I sense it. Part of it was demeanor. He was unflappable. But what else about Lenny that made him good as a coach?
He's got, his personality is such that he is able to relate and talk with anybody at any level. He doesn't ever put himself above anybody. He's very humble, but very, very accomplished. And you don't have to look far into the internet to find all the great accomplishments of Lenny Wilkins. 3 times inductee into the NBA Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame. And I think his ability to just relate very, very well, especially to players who are a little bit more mature, a little bit more established. And that's where Lenny's forte was, coming in with great teams like the Sonics, the Atlanta Hawks, the Cleveland Cavaliers, teams that had established veterans that would take his lead, his example out onto the floor and execute it so well. And I've gotten to know him so much more as a person over the last couple of decades. We try to have breakfast once every couple of months or so. And just to be able to talk and to bask in all that wisdom of basketball when he came in the league back in the 50s. And, the segregated South, playing in St. Louis, playing in Atlanta, all these great stories he has of what he's gone through. And his contributions to this great game of basketball are just it's just unmatched. And I relish my time with him every time I get together with him.
And they've done so much with Climate Pledge Arena. They got so much right with that building. I'm not sure if they got anything wrong. It's just a beautiful palace. It's going to lead, I think, to the NBA coming back here. But among the things the city of Seattle did, and the Kraken, I think, agreed to it, and I can't imagine anyone thinking this wasn't a good idea. Let's rename the street in front of the building. Who would be best to name it after? And I don't know, James, you come up with a better idea than naming it Lenny Wilkens' Way. It was such a perfect thing. What did that mean to him? Have you guys talked about that? What does it mean to him to know that forever now that arena will be located on the street named after him?
I think he was very honored by it. He told me about it. I wasn't able to make the ceremony, but I heard all about it. I talked to him a couple of days before, a couple of days after it. He was so glad of the turnout. He's very proud of Seattle, even though Seattle's going through some challenging, different times now than we knew. Remember back in the 80s and 90s. But he was proud of that accomplishment, proud of the recognition. This will further etch his name into Seattle folklore. His legacy will be established forevermore. And we just hope when the Sonics do come back, and I think there's a good possibility, probably 3 to 5 years from now, hopefully, that we're all still around to enjoy the coming back of the NBA. And Lenny Wilkens is here to enjoy all those things as well.
I mentioned earlier about his demeanor, and I'm wondering, I mean, he had to get angry sometime. What was Lenny like when he was angry? Did he ever raise his voice? I mean, he's a New York guy. You figure he knows how to talk loud if he has to. Did Lenny ever get like really, because like we'll talk about George Carlin. It's like, well, we all saw George get mad from time to time. He's a very emotional guy. Did Lenny ever get wound up like that?
I never ever saw him, throw a clipboard or curse somebody out. I don't think he ever threw a curse word out even in the room. But he was a scrappy guy on the court. He was an all-star player. He played hard. He told me a great story about when Wilt Chamberlain and Al Attles were playing with the San Francisco Warriors. And Lenny was getting into a scrap with Al Attles. And Wilt came over to break it up. And got in the middle of those two guys. Lenny respected that. He wasn't going to take on Wilt, but he was taking on Al.
Well, Al's no small guy, but I mean, Wilt arrives. It's like, it's time to stop this guy. This can only get worse now. Hey, another thing about your career, and we'll talk more about the other places that you played and who you played with and for, but it struck me as I was getting ready to talk to you, and I don't know how much I've talked to you about this over the years. When we had Jack Stigma on, I got to thinking about, Jack's numbers are incredible given the fact of who his competition was. And you're the same guy. You're a big man playing in the 80s. You didn't have a lot of nights off. There weren't too many nights where you were looking at the opponent and going, all right, I got a pretty easy night tonight. I mean, it really was. And there's a lot of great young big guys right now in the NBA. And I like that. I love the big man in the game. But man, oh man, the 80s. You think about night in and night out who you were facing. Who are the? I mean, Abdul-Jabbar is still there. Lanier is around. Walton is around. I mean, there were no easy nights.
You're right. Every team had a 7-footer or two, and this was the era of the big man back to the basketball, and playing night after night. You just did not have a night off where you played against an undersized center. Until maybe late in the 80s, the Alvin Adams and those kind of guys. But for the most part, all the guys I played against in the early 80s were 7 foot tall. And Kareem, Lanier, like you said, Stigma, Moses Malone. I mean, they just kept and night after night. Robert Parrish, I can keep going on, Artis Gilmore. And, so I had to be on top of my game every single night. Now, my game wasn't to try to outscore them. My game was, defense and blocking shots and rebounding and trying to slow them down as best I can, because I was always fortunate to play with a lot of great scorers who can put up the points. And my job was to get out there and try to get double-figure points, maybe double-figure rebounds, block a couple shots, and slow those big guys down.
Well, you talk about undersized guys too. The two that come to mind, neither one of them was a day at the beach. I imagine Wes Unseld was no fun to play against, and Dave Cowens was, would be thought of as an undersized guy. He was a load as well. I mean, these guys,
That's,
there was nothing easy.
that's right. They were hard nosed, put your hard hat on kind of guys and go to work. Not a lot of flash with either Wes or Dave Cowens, but they got the job done. They played against those big guys. They played bigger than they were. And so I played against all those guys coming in. Matter of fact, when the NBA came out with their all-time greatest 50 top players, 1996, they put their first list out. I looked at that list and I played against 37 of those all-time great players, 37 of them.
It's amazing. And I mean, just night in and night out. I say no easy nights. One of the things that people would remember too about the era you were in Seattle was, the Sonics started playing a few games here and there at the Kingdome, and then by the early '80s, they were playing all of their games at the Kingdome. There were some advantages from the standpoint of everybody could get in. You really, if you couldn't get a ticket to that game, you weren't trying. But there were disadvantages in playing in a dome too. Talk about playing in the Kingdome a bit, and what you liked about it, maybe what you didn't like.
Well, as a big guy, it didn't bother me. I mean, I didn't have to deal with depth perception and all those kind of things that a lot of the shooters complained about. Fred Brown and all the great shooters, they'd come into the Kingdome and they have to kind of, factor in the depth perception because you're looking out into this cavernous arena of people.
Right.
On one and empty seats on the other end, and you're trying to, gauge your shot the best way you can. But the good ones figure it out. And I played close to the basket, so my job was to get up there and dunk a few or rebound a few in the Kingdome. But it was a great atmosphere, even though the fans were a little bit removed from us, several tens of yards. You could still hear, especially way up there, when you get 30 or 40,000 people in there, like we did for the first some playoff games. That was just an incredible environment to be part of.
Did you feel like it gave you an advantage from the standpoint of the other teams coming in? You're right, the depth perception, the shooting issues. It's just a weird atmosphere for basketball. That being said, you guys were in there every night, so did that give you an advantage when the other team came in?
I think so. We practiced there quite a bit as well. And so we had a chance to really acclimate ourselves to all those different issues that teams faced when they first came in. Now, if we weren't on top of our game, of course, as you know, any team could beat any team on any given day.
Right.
So they kept us sharp and on top of our game. And we had some real tonic teams, 80, 81, 82, when I was there, 83. We made some playoff runs, but the team started changing. We started, trading out a few players here and there. And then I moved on in 1983 down to the San Diego Clippers.
Iconic Sonics in part 2 coming up. Our show, of course, brought to you by the Swinomish Casino and Lodge just outside Anacortes on Highway 20. Beautiful place to play and stay and enjoy yourself. And by Dick's Drive-In Restaurants. We thank the Swinomish Casino and Lodge and Dick's for their support. And we'll be back with James Donaldson as we continue on this episode of Iconic Sonics. Iconic Sonics is proudly supported by Swinomish Casino and Lodge, and they're proud partners with Iconic Sonics. They're located on beautiful Padilla Bay, just north of Seattle. Casino, lodge, dining, entertainment, and more. Swinomish Casino and Lodge provides a perfect getaway for relaxation. A full-service entertainment destination, including a 98-room luxury lodge, multi-purpose event center, and casino, open daily from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. with a great mix of slot machines and Las Vegas-style table games. And for the food connoisseur, check out the 13 Moons Dining Experience, one of the finest in the area, a beautiful restaurant with cuisine designed to enhance the flavors of the Northwest. Swinomish Casino and Lodge, check out the best casino in the area with the most outstanding customer service, offering a luxuriant, state-of-the-art experience while maintaining and upholding the cultural identity of the Swinomish tribe. Swinomish Casino and Lodge. Find out more at SwinomishCasinoandLodge.com. That's SwinomishCasinoandLodge.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. Iconic Sonics is fed by Dick's Drive-In Restaurants. What can I tell you about Dick's food that you don't already know? Probably nothing. They're a Seattle legend. for serving great burgers, great fries, great shakes. What I can tell you that you might not know is Dick's also has a cool t-shirt now that salutes the 95-96 NBA Finals Sonics team. Take a look at the Sonics t-shirts available through Dick's at Dick's Drive-Ins, their Twitter feed at Dick's Drive-Ins. You'll see the photos. You'll buy the shirt. You'll be happy. Thanks to Dick's Drive-In Restaurants for the support on Iconic Sonics. And our nonprofit sponsor on Iconic Sonics is the Run Freely Foundation, a 501c3 organization founded by our friend Kenny Main. It raises money to help financially support veterans who need limb salvage, medical care, and rehabilitation. Years ago, Kenny suffered a catastrophic ankle injury, and after years of pain, he found relief with treatment in 2017 that got him both walking and running again pain-free. With that discovery, Kenny wanted to help others in pain, and the Run Freely Foundation was born to help provide the care he received to those who cannot afford to cover its costs. You can find out more and get involved with this great organization at runfreely.org. The Run Freely Foundation, proud sponsor of Iconic Sonics. We continue now with James Donaldson, and you mentioned, James, as we went to break, that you got traded to the Clippers, and I don't mean to take shots at the Clippers, and they've certainly become an NBA powerhouse franchise, and with our friend Steve Ballmer down there calling the shots, they're trying to get an arena built. They got a lot of things going on. In the mid 80s, they were not that. You even played a year in San Diego, didn't you? Didn't you play the last year in San Diego with the Clippers?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I was traded down there. Coach Jimmy Lynam, I remember flying up from San Diego to my home in Seattle and just talking to me and begging with me and let me understand this is the business of basketball. You get traded sometime. I wanted to be a Sonic for life like Fred Brown was. Mm-hmm. And during my career, I'm faced with my first trade. I took it reluctantly, went down there, but it became a blessing in disguise because I went down there to be a backup to Bill Walton, who was having injury problems and taking the week off and going to law school up at Stanford and playing on the weekends. And so before you know it, I'm in the starting lineup in my fourth year in the NBA as a San Diego Clipper. And this is where I really started to blossom because I'm out there playing every night against all the great players and just had to keep on going and doing what I had to do.
You mentioned Bill Walton, and you got to be teammates with him for a couple of years. And Bill's whole career might have been different if his feet had cooperated. He had huge foot issues. As you said, there was always thought, did he want to be in the NBA? What kind of teammate was Bill? What kind of guy was he? We hear him now on broadcast that he's crazy as a loon. I mean that like in a good sense. He's fun to listen to. He's very different. But he says things like the entire Pac-12 should be in the NCAA tournament. You go, well, hang on a second, Bill. What kind of guy was he, and what kind of teammate was he?
Yeah, Bill was always that kind of guy, just kind of eccentric a little bit different. His own drummer, beaten to his own drummer. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I was talking with my old coach, Don Casey, who was the assistant coach with Jim Lynam, San Diego Clippers. And we were reminiscing about our time together and Bill Walton being on our team. Bill used to have his kids, Luke Walton and a couple of his younger brothers, sitting on the bench during the games in San Diego. They weren't ball boys. They're just sitting there having the best seat in the house right next to the players. And, what can you say? This is Bill Walton. This is kind of his town, kind of his team. Right. And then I recall one time him coming to a timeout huddle with Jim Lynam being the coach. And he's saying, Coach, I got a 3 in me. I feel a 3 in me. And he wanted Coach to draw up a 3-point play for him, which I think he did. I don't know if he made it or not, but just that kind of crazy stuff that kept things going all the time.
Well, I got to tell you, because I looked this up, not only did he not make it, he didn't take it. And here's why I know this. The other night, and I've teased you about this for years, the other night in a broadcast, Bill Walton says, I never attempted a 3-pointer in my NBA career. And they go, really? Yeah. I said, well, James Donaldson never attempted a 3. You played a lot more games than Bill. But I looked it up. Bill Walton never attempted a 3, but he did have a great story. He said that the only time he remembered attempting a 3 was at the end of a practice with the Celtics. Yeah. And they're just playing like 2-on-2, and he hits a 3 to win a game against Bird and McHale. He and somebody else are playing Bird and McHale, and I might have been Ainge and him. So you have that in common with Bill. He the injuries definitely. I mean, I was happy for him when he got with the Celtics and got to be with the championship team because Bill Walton was a great basketball player. He just physically, it shows you, like a guy like you that played for years, you do have to be blessed with a little bit of luck with injuries, don't you?
You really do. I mean, I took care of myself, but I was blessed genetically, I guess, to have a good, strong structural foundation that held up, still holding up to this day. I don't have any knee pain or back pain or hip pain or anything. I did have a heart issue 4 or 5, 6 years ago, but I'm okay with all that and feel really good. But I think some of it is just lady luck smiling on you and blessing you with a good body that's going to hold up night after night. And the pounding we take in the NBA, 82 games, traveling through the night to the next city, it does take its toll on you after a while. So you have to take care of yourself.
And Lady Luck smiled on you again in your career when you got sent from the Clippers to Dallas. And what I mean by that is you suddenly went back into a championship caliber organization. People forget the late 80s. The Mavericks never quite got there. And the Lakers, you played a great 7-game series with the Lakers in 88. But you joined a Mavericks team. They were loaded with talent. Some future guys that would come through here, Sam Perkins and Detlef Schrempf. Talk about those. Going from the Clippers to Dallas, that must have been a great feeling in terms of getting in with an organization that was committed to being a winner.
It was. I remember my line when I got traded, I've died and gone to heaven. The Mavs, they came in 1980 into the league. They were an expansion team, and they were always viewed as this donut host team. Meaning a hole in the middle. They didn't have a big time center who could get out there and bang and play with the big guys. And so they brought me in specifically for that purpose. And we had great players throughout, young players, Mark Aguirre, Rolando Blackman, Sam Perkins was there, Dudley, as you mentioned. Dale Ellis played with us for a couple of years before Dale came to Seattle and blossomed into the superstar he was in Seattle. We had a great team, great coach. I love Dick Motta and being coached by him. And we almost got there. We were knocking on the door for a couple of years, 7 games with the Lakers in 1988 Western Conference Championship, but we lost in 7 games and never quite got back there again as things started unraveling with some issues on the court, off the court, Aguirre being traded for Adrian Dantley, Roy Tarpley having issues on and off the court. So we went through a lot of changes, but we were right there in one of the best teams of the late 80s in the NBA, especially in the Western Conference.
That 88 series, that team goes on, the Lakers go on to beat the Pistons. It's kind of the end of the Showtime Lakers. What was Kareem like at that point in his career? I mean, you could watch him and see, okay, this isn't the guy of, none of us are like that, from 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But he also had gotten smarter, I know. What was it like playing against him, say, in 1980 when you came into the league versus 88 when he's at the end of his run?
Well, we could tell he was slowing down a little bit. They weren't relying on him to get 20, 25 points a night anymore. A matter of fact, it was big news when his double-figure streak of points scored per game finally came to an end. It was big news. He got single digits that night. I was able to, be physical with him and play him hard and really, I wasn't a speedster by any means, but try to make him run up and down the court, bang him on the box. But he was still, always will be one of the all-time greats. I think, in my opinion, he is the GOAT. He doesn't get enough accomplishments and recognition for that. But Kareem was the man, and I was just honored to play against him dozens of times, as I did in the Western Conference. And they came out on top when it mattered most. We beat them once in a while, but not on a consistent enough basis to make it past them.
To give you an idea of the respect that Kareem had among his peers, I always thought this was a pretty amazing story. When Jack Sikma went into the Basketball Hall of Fame, he called Kareem and said, "I'd like you to introduce me." Imagine that, imagine that. That's the level of respect. Jack says, "I'm going to ask this guy," because I always, from other big guys I've talked to, that you guys do have that in common. Nobody really knows what it's like to be that tall and to be demanded of in an athletic way. Did you have a relationship at all with Kareem off the floor? Did you guys talk much or get to know each other a little bit?
No, and I've always wanted to. I've been dying to get to know him better as a person. He's always pretty quiet and off to himself. And I remember even being in an elevator one time with him and a couple other folks, and he basically just looked off into the corner of the elevator. Two people I would love to have the opportunity to sit down and talk with while we have the opportunity to do so. One is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The other is Bill Russell. Iconic players, great citizens and individuals of this country. And I would love that opportunity to just pick their brain and talk with them and learn their experiences in real time one of these days.
Another guy that you mentioned that I want to just touch on again, we talked about Bill Walton and the injury issues. Sometimes issues come up with great athletes that are more self-inflicted. And God rest Roy Tarpley, that was his issue. He had demons, drugs and alcohol and things that have felled other people in the professional sports world and in other worlds as well. And you'd know better than most being a teammate. Roy Tarpley was very talented. He probably only scratched the surface of what he could have done if he could have had his life together. Talk a little bit about him as a person and as a teammate and as a player.
Wow, an amazing player. I mean, before Dirk Nowitzki came along, I thought Roy Tarpley was the best Dallas Maverick ever. Better than Aguirre, better than Harper and Blackman. I mean, he was able to do things as a 7-footer that, he was the forerunner of all these great things you see now in the NBA. And he had demons off the court. And I viewed him as my little brother. I took him under my wing. I worked with him. We'd have little friendly wagers every night about who's going to get 20 rebounds that night. He beat more times than not, but it elevated my game too to get out there and get 20 rebounds every now and then. But it's just sad that to see such a talent, and we could just see this train wreck getting ready to occur. And I don't think he ever lived up to his potential. He could have been a great all-time NBA player. Would have gone down as the greatest Maverick in history, probably even better than Nowitzki has been. And Nowitzki was a great player, but you just don't have those kind of players come along that often. And somebody like Roy Tarpley, I worked with him as best I could. We had a special assistant coach, Clifford Ray, working with him as best he could. He had a lot of support, a lot of help around him, but every once in a while, he'd wiggle his way through one of those little cracks and he'd get himself into trouble. And that ultimately cost him his career and cost him his life ultimately too.
Yeah. So it's just a great player. And again, it's the old thing. It's true of addiction in any phase. And with any person, they've got to want the help. Everybody around them can try and help and say, come on, man, come on. At some point, it's got to be them. And if they don't, then it sadly, it can end this way. It's a shame.
Too bad, yes.
You end your career with the Utah Jazz, but let's not talk about that because, the Jazz, so what? And I kid. But I want to talk about the Knicks because you spent a brief time with the Knicks. You get traded to the Knicks in 1992. They're a championship caliber team, and they've just got this guy, Michael Jordan, that they've got to try and get by, and the Pistons are still around. You didn't play much, but you're on the roster. You're looking at all this talent. You're watching Pat Riley coach them. What are your memories of your time in New York City with the Knicks in that 1992 season?
Yeah, I think Pat Riley was probably one of the best coaches I've ever played for. He had a way of master motivating his team to have this attitude as us against the world, us 12 guys and coaching staff against everybody out there in whatever arena we played in. And the great players we had, I mean, Patrick Ewing was one of the leaders on the team, both on the court and also in the locker room. Charles Oakley, young players like John Starks and Greg Anthony. Xavier McDaniels was with us for a year. And I only played half the season with them. We made it to the Eastern Conference Championship. We lost in 7 games to the Chicago Bulls, even after we were up, I think 3-1 or 3 games. They came back and won the championship series. And but what a team, and such a physical team. Practices were so hard, and we went at each other night after night, day after day. Pat Riley was that kind of coach who can get the most out of all you guys and really keep us all in line. Everybody had their lane that we stayed in. And I'm sure he coached the same way with the Lakers when he was with Showtime. But everybody had their lane, everybody had their roles and responsibilities, and we did it to the best that we possibly could. So we were right there knocking on the door again, but not quite getting through.
What I thought about Riley as a coach was that he coached the Showtime era Lakers, and they were thought of as more run and flash and Hollywood. And then he coaches the Knicks, and the Knicks are very good, and they're more of push you around and bump you and knock you over and start a fight if they had to. And he had success at both of those, and then goes down to Miami and has tremendous success, championship caliber success in Miami as an executive. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody above him in terms of, I mean, you can say, well, as a coach, Phil Jackson, maybe, I don't know. You can argue that kind of stuff forever, but Pat Riley's right at the top of the list, isn't he, in terms of basketball people over the course of our lives who had success at everything they tried.
Yeah, it's a great example of playing and dealing with the hand that you're dealt. And so Pat Riley had 3 or 4 different teams, 3 or 4 different styles of players, and he made the adjustment. He didn't make the team make the adjustment. There was no way the Knicks of 90, 92 were going to be the Showtime Laker flying up and down the court. So he adjusted to their style, and the same in Miami, and was able to bring those teams right to the cusp of championships. Miami, they actually won a couple. And so that is what it's all about. When you are a great coach, you can really relate well to the personnel and the hand that you're dealt, not to force what you believe and your way onto them, but to adapt to what you have and get the most out of them.
James, before we talk about your book and what you've done with your life in these last few years, which is remarkable, I just want to get your thoughts. I know you've been involved in Seattle government, you've been involved as a civic leader, and you've been involved as a basketball player in this community. You mentioned earlier, it feels like in the next 3 to 5 years, it sure does feel like the NBA is coming back, doesn't it? I mean, more than just a dream anymore. It's okay, they got a building. There's ownership contenders out there. It feels like this is going to happen. What will it mean to the city, do you think, to get the NBA and the Sonics back?
Well, I think it's going to be a huge feather back in our cap. Seattle has always been blessed since the turn of the millennial to have these great sports fans, these great corporations, Microsoft, Starbucks, Amazon. But you go back to the mid '70s when the Seahawks and the Mariners came to town. The Sonics were here in the mid '60s, and we've always been a great sports town, even though we've got plenty of other options of how to spend our entertainment dollar. Those fans out there who love the Sonics and save our Sonics and bring our Sonics back, all these different groups are just dying for the opportunity to get our team back. The Sonics were here for 42 years, Gas, 42 years. And then all of a sudden up and left, and we've been without them since 2009. So, do the math. It's been a while. But I do think finally there's been some starts and stops with the conversations and the talks. But with the NBA and Adam Silver mentioning on occasion, rarely over the last 2 or 3 years, that there will be an expansion of the NBA, 2 more teams, most likely Las Vegas and Seattle. He didn't say that, but that's right. Most people jumping to that conclusion. Why not? And I think it will be a glorious day when the Sonics come back, and I'm going to be there. I hope to get some kind of position in the executive corporate offices and be a community guy and be out there working our folks. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, that'd be awesome if that all comes to fruition. You knowing you all these years and getting to watch you play a little bit, I a lot of things about you that I like, but I was never more proud of you than the last 4 or 5 years when you had to face some tough things that fortunately as a society we've become better about talking about. We're not as stigmatized as we used to be when we talk about depression or mental health. Or contemplating the worst in life, which is, of course, taking your own life. These are things you went through. You went through some tough times. And when you got through it, you said, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, James. That had to be a tough decision. I think people would look at you and go, oh, look at this guy, big NBA star, made lots of money, has nothing to be worried about at all. And a lot of that went away for you, and you were never a bigger man than when you stood up and said, I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to be honest about it. How tough was that decision when you got to it and said, you know what, I'm going public with this and I want everyone to know what I've gone through?
Well, I felt compelled to do so. After I went through those 12 months of darkness and despair, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations in 2018, it wasn't that long ago. When I finally emerged from all that, and I knew with God's help, He brought me through. I didn't know why He let me go through it, but now I understand that now I have that real life experience of losing everything. I mean, I had 4 major surgeries in 5 years, mainly on my heart. I almost died, and I pulled through that. And then right after all that, my mother passes away. My wife walks out on our marriage, takes her boy with her, my stepson. I lost my business, the Donaldson Clinic. I'd run for almost 30 years. I'd lost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings from an NBA in the bank that I spent trying to save my business. I declared bankruptcy. I declared foreclosure on my home, and I lost everything. And I was starting all the way over again on a very, very fixed income, living in an apartment. I had lost my home I'd lived in for 40 years, lived in an apartment, and I came out of all of that saying, you know, now I understand. Now I know. And I'm going to be that voice and that advocate for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And that's what I've been doing ever since that time. You know, I wrote and published a book. I do a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of interviews about mental health, trying to encourage folks, especially our communities of color, that are very, very, very reluctant to reach out for help mental health wise. Because of the stigmas and the taboos and the traditions and things that we're so fearful of. I'm trying to encourage them as a larger than life, almost African American who's not afraid to cry, who's a former professional athlete. And I get men, especially from around the country, calling me and talking to me about what they're going through. And many of them are on the verge of suicide. So I'm talking with them, coaching them, working with them to help them see that tomorrow is going to be better, but you just got to hang in there and ask for help.
I'm so proud of you, and the world is a much better place with you in it than not being in it. And I don't mean to trivialize that, but that ultimately, when you get to that point, it's like, thank goodness and thank God and thank whatever that you were able to step back and go, no, I'm going to get through this. And you did. I've got Celebrating Your Gift of Life somewhere, but don't let this backdrop fool you. My office from below here is a disaster. I know you've got a copy probably sitting there. If you're typical, like I got 20 copies of my book I could hold up. There it is, Celebrating Your Gift of Life, James Donaldson. And you've got a website where people can go and get a signed copy of this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is Celebrating Your Gift of Life. You can get it at celebratingyourgiftoflife.com, which is my website. And if you come through there, I personally autograph and sign off, put a nice little inspiring message in there for you. Amazon's not going to do that for you, but I'll do that. But come on through my website and maybe share what you're going through. And if it's not for you or for a loved one that's going through difficult times, that's totally fine as well. I'm here to help. And I've devoted the next chapter of my life, these next 20 years, God willing, of just really being out there helping as many people as I possibly can. You know, what the catalyst was to help me make it through, Mike, was when Tyler Helinski took his life in January 2018, the young Washington State University quarterback, heir apparent, and he was going to be a great one. He took his life on the campus of WSU. And at that moment, I mean, everybody's trying to tell his story and try to talk about how great a kid Tyler was. And I got a chance to meet his parents and work with them. I said, I don't want people out there trying to tell my story.
Right.
You know, as much as I adore you, I don't want you out there trying to tell my story. I'd rather tell my story. And that really made me doggedly determined to make it through and to finally emerge on the other side of that darkness and be able to tell the story and really feel empathetically folks are going through. And so that's what I do with my life nowadays.
Well, I'm glad you're here to do it. I love you. You've always been so generous with your time with me and generous with your knowledge of the game. And as I say, the world's a better place with you here. So you're not going anywhere for a while. So that's good. And at least until we find a home for the James Donaldson doll behind you there, which you said you've had since 1982. Somebody made that for you in 1982. I thought I was a pack rat. Geez, you've got stuff that's older than me.
It's homemade. Got my name on the back. A fan just gave it to me one day after a game, or sent it to the Sonic office. Remember the old Sonic office on
Sure.
They sent it. I've kept it ever since. I've got a pillow. Same thing. Sonic's emblem. A couple of our Sonic albums from 1979. I've had a chance since I lost my home. I had a chance to go through storage of boxes that were stored up in my attic in my home for almost 40 years, and most of the stuff I didn't even know I had.
Right.
So I'm on stuff every single day. And I'm not really a pack rat, but I do keep these kind of sentimental things. But if there's a serious Sonic collector out there that wants some Sonic stuff, just contact me and we'll see what we can do.
I'm glad you clarified that, because I was going to ask if that was a Sean Kemp doll behind you with the number 40 on it. I'm glad you clarified it that it's a James Donaldson doll by turning away. That's not Sean. Doesn't look like Sean at all. Yeah, look at that hair.
That's what I used to have.
James, it's great to see you. Thanks for reminiscing with us, and we look forward to a time, hopefully. And you said 3 to 5 years. I hope it's closer to 3 that we all gather at a Sonics game and at Climate Pledge Arena and have a great time. Thanks for doing this for us.
Thank you so much, guys. Great to see you, and let's stay in touch and keep on doing the great work we're doing.
It's James Donaldson, our guest on Iconic Sonics. CelebratingYourGiftOfLife.com is his website if you'd like more information. And our thanks, as always, to the Swinomish Casino and Lodge and Dick's Drive-In Restaurants for their support. Fun to reminisce with former Seattle SuperSonic and former NBA star James Donaldson here on Iconic Sonics. I'm my guest, and we'll see you next time.